In the flickering light of the crackling campfire, which cast strange dancing shadows, the skald slowly rose. His face, a map etched with the wrinkles of time, reflected the wisdom and burden of ages past. His eyes, burning with an inner fire, pierced the faces of the assembled, who stood in reverent silence, awaiting his words. A gentle breeze rustled through the leaves of the trees, as if nature itself held its breath in anticipation of what was to come. "My friends," the skald began, his voice, like the rumble of distant thunder, filled the night air. He paused dramatically, as if letting the full weight of the impending events settle upon them. "The era that brought us here is as old as the stones we walk upon. But what I am about to tell you now, this is more than just the end of a story, the end of legends, the end of times." His gaze fixed upon the depths of the flames, as if seeing the reflection of the future within them. Konrad, Odin's chosen, the man who dared to face Ragnarok, has reached a turning point where even the gods look upon him with awe and hope. He has journeyed through worlds, confronted forces of destruction, and defied fate itself. He knew no weariness, no fear. But now, my friends, the decisive battle begins. The skald raised a horn filled with mead, his gaze sweeping over the faces illuminated by the campfire. Ragnarok, the end of the world, is relentlessly approaching. The wolf Fenrir grows larger with each passing second, his hunger insatiable. The earth trembles, and the heavens weep fiery tears. Destruction follows close on our heels. But Konrad, armed with the royal sword, did not falter. He did not retreat. He understood that fate no longer left him a choice. He knew that by stepping into the last city, by passing through the gates of the realm of gods, he would face something far greater than all his previous trials. The skald gave a bitter smile, the golden drink touching his lips. The realm where the gods dwell, where the destinies of mortals and immortals intertwine. This sacred land, my friends, will be a place of revelation where Konrad, the last warrior, will grasp the truth of his fate and confront his greatest trial. What he will find there, among the gods, will surpass the wildest dreams of the greatest heroes. The skald's gaze, fixed on the flames, was full of wisdom and sorrow. But Konrad is no longer the man we knew. He has been transformed into a sword of destruction, a blade forged by the gods for this very hour. And what will happen when he meets those who weave destiny? Will he become a beacon of hope, or will he be consumed by the power that created him? The atmosphere around them thickened, as if the night itself was preparing for the greatest trial. Ragnarok looms, bringing with it the demise of all we hold dear. But in Konrad's heart burns a flame of courage, capable of illuminating even the end of times. The skald cast a final glance at the horizon, the campfire's flames reflected in his eyes, and slowly leaned back. But this, my friends, is a story for the end of the night, and like all great sagas, the resolution of this story cannot be told until we know what the gods truly expect from a man like Konrad. With these words, the skald fell silent, and the sound of the flames seemed to intensify. The wind whispered through the trees, as if in anticipation of what was to come, and all present realized that the end was near. Meanwhile, amidst the howl of an icy wind that pierced the skin like daggers, a long ship with black sails cut its way through treacherous waters. The seafarer, as impassive as ever, held the helm firmly. Konrad looked at the horizon with a growing sense of unease. He had traveled 8 kingdoms, delivering his message, warning kings, warriors, and peoples. Ragnarok was nigh, and his destiny was inextricably linked to its arrival. But something told him that his mission was far deeper than he could imagine. He had been chosen, but for what great purpose? The weight of this mission seemed to grow with each passing day, and he felt a rising pressure as if the heavens were pressing down on his shoulders. He knew only one realm remained to visit: Asgard, the abode of the gods, where, he felt, the truth must be revealed. As the frozen land appeared ahead, the seafarer broke the silence. "We have arrived, Conrad, the final step before your destiny is fulfilled. But know that the journey ahead is not merely a battle against the end of times. You're about to learn a truth that few mortals can comprehend." Conrad looked at the seafarer suspiciously, but said nothing. What else could he do but follow the path ordained by the gods? With a sigh, he pushed off the side of the ship and headed towards the icy shore where they were to disembark. The island where the longship docked was a realm of immense cold, covered in a thick layer of snow and ice, with majestic mountains rising in the distance, encircling the coast. It was a desolate land, devoid of visible life, a silence that seemed to conceal something more, something awaiting its hour. Conrad, feeling the crunch of snow and ice underfoot, made his way along the snowy shore. Gusts of wind stung his face, but his mind was focused only on the next step of his arduous journey. He had done his duty, warning the kingdoms of the impending threat, but the next step required actions beyond anything he had ever done. Stopping in the middle of the beach and fixing his gaze on the endless icy horizon, he felt an unbearable pressure in his chest, as if an invisible force was calling to his soul. Falling to his knees was not a sign of weakness, but a conscious necessity. Conrad understood that if Ragnarok truly was at the doorstep, he needed to prepare for the coming trials. "Oh, Odin, oh, All-Father," Conrad whispered in a low, reverent voice, "grant me the wisdom to face what is to come. Let me know what must be done, and do not let me fail." The sound of the wind seemed to intensify, as if the island's trees listened to his every word. Conrad's raven, which had faithfully accompanied him on this journey, soared skyward, circling above him, its black wings cutting through the frosty air. As Conrad watched the raven's flight, he sensed the presence of something greater, something incomprehensible, in the air. In the blink of an eye, the raven's silhouette began to distort, and its wings transformed into a vast, imposing shadow. The raven grew in size, its body expanding, taking on human outlines. Conrad was stunned, a wave of astonishment and confusion running down his spine. Now standing before him was not a raven, but the embodiment of immense power. The figure before him was as black as night itself, clad in a flowing cloak, his face expressing stern determination. He gazed at Conrad with a piercing look, and it seemed as though the very air around him warped with his presence. The seafarer, who had been silent until now, burst into laughter, deep and resonant like thunder. "Ah, Conrad, you are closer than you think." Conrad, startled and bewildered, fixed his gaze on the seafarer, whose outlines began to dissolve into the air. The man standing beside him slowly vanished, revealing his true form: long golden hair, a stern face, and the piercing eyes of a god. Conrad came to his senses, his knees trembling with the realization of the truth. "Odin was not the only one guiding you," the god who had appeared before him said. "I am Tyr, god of war, protector of warriors and true heroes." Conrad could barely believe his ears. He looked at Tyr and, with a trembling voice, asked, "So all of this, everything I've done until now, was part of a grand design?" Tyr nodded, his face softening, but the gravity of his words remained unchanged. "Yes, young warrior. From the moment you took up the royal sword, you were marked for something greater. Ragnarok is upon us, and you, Conrad, are the only one capable of defeating Fenrir. Neither Odin nor any other god can do it. Only you." Conrad felt a chill run down his spine, but at the same time a surge of elation rose within him. He had been guided, protected, and most importantly, he had been chosen. He, and he alone, was destined to destroy the wolf prophesied to destroy the gods. He was the one who would fight the final battle against Fenrir. But before he could utter a word, the sky darkened, and a distant roar echoed across the island. It was a deep, earth-shaking sound. The wolf's shadow began to grow, and the wind carried the scent of death. Fenrir comes. He is stronger than ever, Tyr said in a grave tone. The fate of the world rests in your hands, Conrad. Now you must go to Asgard, where the final battle will take place. Ragnarok cannot be avoided, but it can be challenged. The ground trembled, and the sky seemed to collapse under the pressure of the approaching wolf. Fenrir appeared in all his monstrous form, more fierce and terrifying than ever before. In his red eyes burned the fury of an entire age of destruction, and his steps echoed, foretelling the end of the world. Conrad, with the royal sword in hand and finally realizing his true destiny, understood that his path was predetermined. The last journey would be the hardest, but he was ready. The last realm awaited him, and with it, the end of the world and a chance to save all he held dear. The wind swept across the land with furious might, as if nature itself anticipated what was to come. Fenrir, the wolf of destruction, had reached incredible proportions, his roar echoing like thunder, and his presence made the earth tremble beneath their feet. But he was not alone. As the storm approached, creatures from other realms joined him, men and beasts from the darkest kingdoms. Ragnarok ceased to be a legend or a mere threat. It was becoming a reality, and an army of terror gathered under the wolf's shadow. On the darkened fields, legions of warriors from different lands prepared for war. Those fallen in past battles had been resurrected by dark forces. Grotesque creatures with stone skin and iron bones marched alongside them. The dark elves of Svartalfheim, with their poisoned arrows and eyes blinded by hatred, formed a deadly formation next to the armies of the undead from Niflheim. Muspelheim, the realm of eternal flame, sent its blazing beasts, whose claws were sharp as razors. The amalgamation of all these creatures under Fenrir's leadership formed an unstoppable force, an army capable of devouring everything in its path. At the epicenter of the impending disaster, a colossal wolf, whose eyes blazed with primeval fury, led the army of destruction. His deafening howl shook the heavens, and his maw opened to swallow the sun itself and cast the gods from their thrones. The prophecy, once alive only in myths, now took on the form of a terrifying reality, plunging the world into dread before a war of unprecedented scale. While Fenrir and his legions relentlessly approached in another corner of the world, Conrad, accompanied by Tyr, the god of war, and Odin, the All-Father, embarked on a fateful journey. Their path led to Asgard, the citadel of hope, a shimmering beacon for dying worlds. The silence that enveloped their journey was permeated with tension. The weight of the royal sword felt heavier than ever, and the presence of Tyr and Odin beside Conrad evoked a sense of insignificance, as if he were merely a pawn in a game whose rules he did not know. The road to Asgard was difficult, and the piercing northern wind seemed to strive to halt the brave travelers. But Conrad was unwavering. He realized that the fate of the world rested in his hands, and his resolve grew stronger with each step. The lands they passed through lay in ruins, everywhere bearing the scars of destruction and chaos. Fenrir's advance was inevitable, and nothing could stop his crushing power. However, something greater was at stake, something Conrad could not yet comprehend. During their journey, Odin cast a discerning gaze upon Conrad. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked, his voice echoing in the gusts of wind. "The sword, Conrad, is not merely a piece of metal. It is forged for destiny, and you are its guardian." Conrad looked at the royal sword, which emitted a soft glow, as if it harbored a life of its own. With each passing day, he felt an increasingly strong connection to this weapon. He understood that it was no ordinary sword, but what exactly did Odin mean? What other role was he to play beyond participating in battle? In the silent procession, the sword's true power began to unfold. Conrad felt a growing warmth emanating from the blade, a vibration that permeated his hand and spread throughout his body. He felt a surge of power from something ancient, dormant within him. The sword was not just a weapon he carried. It was becoming an extension of his soul. In a moment of enlightenment, Conrad realized the sword was not merely blessed, it was the blade of destiny, created by the gods for a grand purpose. It was under his protection because only he could wield its power to challenge Fenrir. The true battle was not just against the wolf, but in Conrad's realization of his role in saving the world. He was the chosen one, the bearer of the blade capable of ending Ragnarok. Finally, after many days of travel, Conrad, Odin, and Tyr reached the gates of Asgard. The majesty of the gods' realm surpassed all of Conrad's wildest imaginings. Marble towers gleamed in the sun's rays, and the heavens seemed closer, as if the realm itself floated between the world of men and the world of gods. Asgard was a place where destinies intertwined, and the weight of their mission seemed to grow with each step. The gates of Asgard opened before them, and Conrad entered, feeling the gaze of Asgard's inhabitants upon him. They were ready for battle. The streets were filled with warriors, clad in golden armor and shining helmets, ready for war. Eagles soared high in the sky, and Thor's lightning illuminated the surroundings. Everything was prepared for the final confrontation, but Conrad felt that he still had a secret to uncover. Upon entering a magnificent hall, Odin approached the celestial altar and retrieved an imposing suit of armor. It was crafted from gleaming golden metal, adorned with ancient runes and symbols of power. The light emanating from the armor was dazzling, and Conrad, not knowing what to expect, looked at Odin, his heart pounding. This armor was forged by the gods themselves, Odin declared in a solemn tone. It is for you, Conrad, for the final battle. For as you will soon learn, you are not merely a mortal. You are a descendant of Thor. Conrad stood in stunned silence. He had never imagined he was destined for a role other than that of a simple warrior. But standing before this celestial armor, he felt something awaken within him, a part of his lineage he had never suspected. He was a descendant of one of Asgard's greatest gods, Thor himself, the god of thunder. The revelation overwhelmed him. How could he not have known this before? The weight of this discovery seemed to crush him, yet at the same time it imbued him with new strength. He, Conrad, was not merely the chosen one, he was a descendant of a god, and now he understood the true purpose of his mission. He fought not only to save the world, but for the legacy that flowed in his veins. Thus began his transformation. He became a celestial being with white hair and brightly shining eyes. As Conrad tried to comprehend what had happened, the sky suddenly darkened. The sound of a distant roar echoed through the surroundings, announcing that Fenrir was closer than ever. The wolf was advancing, and with him, the army of destruction. Conrad looked at the sword, which now shone even brighter, and felt Thor's presence in his soul. The battle was about to begin. The earth, the sky, and the gods prepared for the final confrontation, and Conrad, clad in the royal sword and celestial armor, was ready to face the greatest trial of all, the end of the world. The skies of Asgard, once reflecting the peace and might of the gods, had now transformed into a burning canvas. Lightning rent the dark clouds like sharp blades, and thunder roared like the cry of the gods themselves, bearing witness to the beginning of the end. Asgard, the last bastion of divine civilization, had become a battle arena. The golden pillars of the palaces cracked, the earth trembled from the force of something incomprehensible, and destruction spread with unrelenting speed. On the side of the gods, the last stronghold of resistance prepared to meet the horror of an invasion that would come from the depths of the abyss itself. Fenrir's army was a colossal sight, uniting beings from the most diverse corners of the universe, their eyes burning with an insatiable thirst for destruction and chaos. Side by side marched grim creatures from Svartalfheim, dark elves clad in ominous armor and armed with poisoned arrows, and colossal stone giants whose steps made the earth tremble. Resurrected undead warriors from Niflheim, with hoarse battle cries, raised their rust-covered swords, ready to unleash their fury upon the enemy. At the head of this apocalyptic army stood Fenrir himself, the wolf destined to herald the demise of the gods. He now surpassed any wildest imagination of his power. His crimson eyes exuded a rage capable of devouring the heavens, and his presence enveloped everything in an aura of death. Every step he took caused cracks in the earth's crust, and his passage left a sinister trail of destruction. His guttural roar seemed to tear the boundaries of creation, sending shockwaves that shook Asgard and the lands beyond. But on the other side of the unfolding battle stood the gods, ready to resist. At the center of the defensive lines stood Thor, grasping Mjolnir in his hand. The thunder and lightning he summoned deafened everything around them, and each strike of his hammer echoed with a celestial explosion. Thor's energy seemed boundless, and his strength was comparable to the might of the storm itself. Every time he wielded Mjolnir, the divine weapon crashed into the enemy hordes, and the heavens were illuminated by flashes of pure divine wrath. Despite Thor's immense power, the tide of this war seemed to be turning towards defeat. Fenrir and his legions showed no sign of retreating. They advanced like an unstoppable wave. And even though their ranks thinned, the number of enemies remained vast, and their strength was so great that even the gods began to feel the heavy toll of this battle. The ground of Asgard trembled from the impacts, and flames began to consume the majestic structures of the celestial realm. At the very heart of this battle stood Conrad, the chosen hero, whose sword shone with a dazzling light, as if embodying the very essence of the gods. Every one of his strikes pierced the ranks of Fenrir's warriors with incredible precision and force. He was no longer an ordinary mortal. The sword he held was not just a blade, but the embodiment of the will of the gods themselves. With a single swing, he cut a path through the ranks of the dark elves, and his enemies fell by the dozens. But even he understood that the decisive confrontation was still to come. The battle had only just begun. Unrelenting determination drove him forward, his heart pounding fiercely in his chest and the heat of battle coursing through his veins. He felt the full weight of his mission. The royal sword, the last hope of all worlds, was in his hands, and he knew that the only way to prevent the inevitable end was to defeat Fenrir. But the wolf was already waiting for him. Suddenly, on the horizon, a majestic figure of a unicorn appeared, its horn glowing with golden light. A sensation of power and connection to nature pierced Conrad's entire body. The unicorn, radiating ethereal might, approached with a grace that seemed to come straight from legends. Conrad did not hesitate for a second. He leaped onto the back of the magical creature and, with a battle cry, charged towards the wolf of destruction. The unicorn surged forward with incredible speed, traversing the battlefield with an agility that seemed to defy reality itself. Noticing Conrad approaching, Fenrir let out a low, contemptuous growl, as if the very idea that a mortal would dare challenge the greatest of monsters was a ridiculous joke. "You insignificant mortal dare to stand against the end of all things?" Fenrir roared, his eyes burning like flames from the abyss. "You are merely a leaf caught in a hurricane, a grain of sand in the sands of time. There is no power capable of defeating me." But Conrad, engulfed by an unknown power, did not flinch. Something had awakened within him, something ancient, something he could not fully comprehend. The strength of his ancestors, Odin and Thor, seemed to flow through his veins. He advanced, pouring his entire being into each step, his sword shining as if an extension of his soul. With every movement, the blade cut through the air, as if it were the very essence of life. He fought not only for his survival, he fought for the balance of all worlds. Fenrir responded with a furious attack, his razor-sharp claws tearing through the air. But Conrad was faster. He dodged, moving with incredible agility, and struck the wolf's side. The blow was so powerful that the very ground of Asgard trembled. But Fenrir, with a deafening roar, rose, retaliating with even greater fury. He attacked with unstoppable force, his sharp teeth threatening to destroy everything in their path. The battle between Conrad and Fenrir turned into a deadly dance, a clash where the fate of all creation was at stake. Every blow echoed through all 9 realms. Every collision between Conrad and the wolf seemed to wound the very fabric of reality. Conrad's strength, fueled by the sword and divine power, achieved the impossible, while Fenrir, in his untamed fury, responded with the force of a hurricane, delivering blows capable of crushing any other warrior. But Conrad did not give up. He knew that if he fell, all would be lost. Ragnarok would conclude, and only ruins would remain of all existence. He had to win. He had to destroy the wolf. The fate of the worlds was in his hands. Finally, with a cry full of power, Conrad raised his sword, channeling all the energy of the gods into it. With a shattering blow, he plunged the blade into Fenrir's very heart. The wolf, letting out a death roar full of pain and rage, crashed to the ground with a thunderous sound that echoed throughout Asgard. Its enormous body collapsed with immense force. The impact shook the earth, and the sky, previously dark and stormy, began to lighten. Fenrir, the great wolf, god of destruction, was vanquished. Fenrir's warriors, witnessing the demise of their leader, laid down their weapons. The destructive force he had unleashed seemed to dissipate into the air, and his minions, woven from shadows and undead, fell prostrate before Conrad's might. In that moment, as both allies and enemies gazed in astonishment at the chosen warrior, the man who had defeated Ragnarok, their voices merged in a unified surge, chanting his name, Conrad, victor of Ragnarok. The Asgardians rejoiced, their shouts of joy echoing through the magnificent halls of Asgard. Odin's chosen, the last hero, the one who ended chaos. Conrad, exhausted, covered in sweat and blood, gazed at Fenrir's fallen body, the sword still deeply embedded in its chest. The sky, once dark and ominous, began to brighten, and divine light seemed to return to the land. Ragnarok had finally concluded, and the world was saved. Conrad's name, the man who faced the end of the world, would now live on through the ages as the name of a hero who defied the gods themselves and emerged victorious. The Skald, his face illuminated by the dancing flames, slowly rose from his seat. The silence around the campfire was deep and palpable, every person present feeling the significance of the moment. The sound of the wind and the crackling of the wood only heightened the solemnity of the words that were about to be spoken. And so, my friends, the Skald began, his deep, resonant voice echoing in the surrounding darkness. The battle, the great war, which began with Fenrir's furious roar, raged in Asgard, where destiny itself hung in the balance. Ragnarok, foretelling the demise of the gods, was closer than ever. But Odin's chosen, Conrad, dared to enter the fray against what many considered inevitable. He paused, his gaze piercing as if he were mentally transported to the battlefield, to the ruins of Asgard, where the fate of ancient worlds was decided. Conrad? Oh, Conrad, the Skald uttered with an almost sacred reverence in his voice. He was no longer merely mortal, but a hero worthy of the gods, a warrior wielding a blade capable of tearing the very fabric of fate. He knew that if he failed, all that was precious and beloved would be doomed to perish. But he did not retreat. He faced Fenrir, the wolf of destruction, the embodiment of the end of all things, with a courage beyond human comprehension. The Skald raised his horn filled with mead, and a shadow of contemplation crossed his face as he took a sip, as if absorbing the very history he was about to tell. And then, my friends, with a sword forged by the gods and consecrated by Odin himself, Conrad struck the decisive blow. The blade pierced Fenrir's heart, and the wolf, the monster that threatened to destroy all worlds, fell. The earth trembled, the heavens split open, and the light of the gods began to return, like dawn after the most brutal storm. The skald looked around at his listeners, his eyes full of deep emotion, as if he himself were reliving this great victory. Fenrir was vanquished, and with him, Ragnarok was halted. Fenrir's forces, seeing their leader fall, surrendered. The chaos he had wrought began to recede, and the kingdoms began to rise from the ashes. But most importantly, my friends, Conrad's name will not be forgotten. He was not just a man who defeated the end of the world. He was a hero who united gods and mortals in the fight against destruction. The skald fixed his gaze on the fire, his hands motionless, as if touching the past itself. The Asgardians, their hearts overflowing with gratitude, chanted his name, Conrad, victor of Ragnarok. And so he will be remembered for generations as the hero brave enough to contend with his destiny. His victory was achieved not only through the strength of his sword, but also through his courage, his unwavering spirit. He was, after all, the chosen one, a descendant of Thor, not just a man, but a warrior capable of defying the very end of the world. He took a deep breath, as if absorbing the full weight of the story, and his voice softened, almost a whisper, as he slowly lowered himself back to his place by the campfire. And so, my friends, the legend of Conrad, the man who defied the gods and defeated Ragnarok, will be sung for generations to come. The end is not a conclusion, the end is merely a beginning. Conrad's sword, the blade of destiny, lives on in our hearts, and as long as there is courage, as long as there are men and women willing to fight, the name of Conrad, the conqueror of Ragnarok, will live forever. The skald again surveyed his listeners, his eyes burning with an inner fire, as if he were part of the story he told. He took another sip of mead, and the sound of the liquid seemed to fill the silence. And so, my dears, we conclude this great saga. Ragnarok has been challenged, but new winds are blowing. Conrad's destiny and our own are still being written in the stars, in the flames of campfires, and in the vows we make. With an enigmatic smile, the skald slowly rose, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the stars shone like the eyes of the gods. But that, my friends, oh that, my friends, is a story for another night.